Hi, I'm Douglas McCall of Cheerful Acceptance Consulting, and this is installment 1 of my video log. A story. In the summer of 2013, my wife Stephanie and I decided to send both of our daughters to a 3-week summer camp. We had been without the girls for long periods before, but this was significant because it was the first time the girls were going to be away with strangers. Although they weren't really strangers, it was run by New York State Masons, and as a Mason, I knew the girls would be in good hands. Nonetheless, this was a significant step for us. Early Monday morning, 6 a.m. as a matter of fact, we packed the girls and their gear in the Jeep and headed for Round Lake, New York, about 15 miles southwest of Old Forge. We had planned on the goodbye process taking 3 or 4 hours, and that we would be done around 1 p.m. We had planned a picnic lunch in the mountains for Stephanie and I, and then a return home to a quiet house. We arrived at the camp at 8:30, which had started the day before, and their day was just starting. We parked at a camp office and went up to announce the girls' arrival. The camp director called 2 counselors, the nurse, and several maintenance guys to carry luggage. Everyone was there, and in 5 minutes, and 2 minutes after that, with a brief, "Bye, Mom, bye, Dad," the girls were gone. I looked at my wife, then at my watch, then at my wife again, and before I could utter a word, she said, "It's 8:45. Now what do we do?" We got in the car and drove down Route 28 to Old Forge and stopped into the visitor center. Suddenly, we had a whole day to ourselves. How nice. I need to take a moment to backtrack. Since June 25th of 2012, my wife and I had started to become more physically active, which is a story for another time. So, we went to the visitor center with the idea of finding a place to hike that morning. Nothing big, just a nice morning walk. The visitor center assistant was very nice and asked, "What is your ability level?" We did not quite know what she was asking, so we said, "Intermediate?" She recommended the Rondax Tower Trail. It was a 3. We figured 3 seemed pretty safe. It was probably a 10-point scale, right? We went to the Rondax trailhead and parked the car. We tied our shoes and started down the trail. After 300 feet, the trail started to head upward. We walked a bit further and came upon a huge rock, taller than either of us and easily as wide as it was tall. It was at that moment we figured out this was a mountain trail, specifically Bald Mountain. We looked at each other and I said, "How bad can it be? It's only a 3. We quickly found out that hiking up a mountain is much easier when there are 2 of you. We were able to stabilize each other as we negotiated rocks, rock faces, roots, and the like. The trail, while marked, was not clearly marked. There were at least 3 points on the way up that we got turned around and a little lost before we found our way. About a third up the way trail, we heard a noise rustling off to the left side. Upon further inspection, we saw something unexpected to us, a bear. He was just out looking for his breakfast, but we forgot the black bears were common in the Adirondacks, especially in the mountains. We quickly and quietly made our way past him, and then we reached it. No, not the top, but it was the first time that we could see out over the dense coverage of the mountain. It was amazing. There are no words to describe the moment when you feel like you've walked a long time, and then to open your eyes and view the beauty and majesty of a mountain sunrise. The mist was still over much of the Adirondacks, and the sight was amazing. We stood there and stared for a very long time. My first thought was, if this is the view partway up the mountain, imagine the view from the top. We looked at each other, talked for a few moments, and committed ourselves to seeing the view from the top. Our unexpected success that far had firmed our resolve to see the process to the end. After that first view of the Adirondacks from the side of a mountain, all my wife and I could talk about was the beauty and the majesty of the view, and how amazing the view must be from farther up. We continued to trek upward. Funny thing about the entire walk up the mountain, early in the trek, it took a significant amount of discussion and problem solving to get around some of the more challenging obstacles. However, the higher up the mountain we got, the less discussion was required. We just moved past obstacles. As we got used to the process, it got easier. We started making pretty good time, at least we thought we did. Then it happened. We arrived at the top of the mountain. If you've never climbed a mountain, you should. It was breathtaking, seeing all of nature spread out before you. I doubt there are accurate words to describe the view. Rondak's Tower was named of was the name of the trail because at the top of the mountain there's a tower. For those of you who are not aware, scattered about the peaks of the Adirondacks are towers that exist for this purpose of spotting wildfires in the Adirondack Park. There are currently 23 of these towers, and Rondak's is one of them. When you get to the top of Bald Mountain, you have the opportunity to climb the Rondak's Fire Tower. There is a great deal of fear and trust in scaling the old metal fire tower. When you are climbing the mountain, your feet are always on the mountain. When you climb the fire tower, you are climbing a man-made structure, strapped to the top of a mountain. You have no idea who built it or how long it had been there. I found out later that this structure was made somewhere around 1910. I was more scared of climbing the 4 staircases of the 3-story fire tower than I was of the 2,350-foot mountain we had just scaled. We stayed up on top of that mountain for 20 or 30 minutes. We sat on the edge, looking off the top of the mountain, and talked about life, us, and how small and insignificant things seemed compared to the grandiose majesty of the view from the top of the mountain. We learned a lot of valuable things that day about each other. Most importantly, however, we learned about perspective. The summer of 2013 was a difficult summer. We had several difficult family situations to deal with. We had an extremely difficult summer with regard to financial solvency. The summer we got into so much trouble financially that we were not certain how we were going to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table until my first school paycheck in September. It was an extremely tough time for us. But every single day, regardless of what challenges the day brought, when things looked bleakest, we remembered back to that morning on the mountain and our change of perspective. It allowed us to refocus and realize what was most important. The money problems would work themselves out. The family issues would get better. As long as we remembered that we had each other, everything would be all right. We all need that moment, that change of perspective. It is very easy for us to get bogged down in the troubles and the minutiae of the day. Before we know it, those little things become our mountains, and suddenly what was only a 3 becomes seemingly unsurpassable. We get lost in the trek up the mountain. Bald Mountain taught me several valuable lessons. 1. Never go hiking without appropriate footwear and water. 2. Always bring a buddy. Sometimes you are going to need them. And 3. Look for that moment that changes your perspective. We started out on our trek, we were wearing our running sneakers, which were great shoes, but definitely not hiking shoes. We also did not bring water. We had walked 2 to 3 miles before. We figured this would be no big deal. Walking is not the same as hiking. The real moral here is that in whatever journey you are setting out on, make sure that you're prepared. I'm not certain if I would have made it to the top of Bald Mountain if I had not gone with Stephanie. There were certain challenges we faced along the way that I would not have surmounted alone. And even if I had made it to the top, when I got lost coming back down the mountain, I might still be there today. As an interesting side note, it is a lot harder to come down a mountain if you have a fear of heights, which to an extent my wife does. No matter what trail life is taking you on, at some point you are going to need a buddy. Always know who you can count on. We all need that opportunity to look at things from a different perspective. And the best way to remember that is to have an eye-opening moment to remind you that you need to find a new perspective. For me, that will always be the view from the top of the mountain. What is your view from the top of the mountain? How will you be reminded to look at things another way?